Good afternoon, my name is Eric Araujo, and this is my second evidence, art as a possibility for dialogue in conflict resolution. Today, I'll be talking about the Moais from Easter Island. Let's begin with some context first. So there's this great museum, the British Museum in London, England. Everybody knows it. And it's a public museum dedicated to human history, art, and culture. Among its famously large collection, however, there are two large stone moai, which are megalithic structures carved by the people of Rapa Nui, an island often called or known as the Easter Island. These structures date to hundreds of years ago and were used by the people of Rapa Nui in ceremonial stuff. They were placed upon platforms, they were very venerated, and are normally called by them the faces of their last ancestors. So it's clear that it's very important for the cultural heritage. So why are they in the British Museum? Well, it's very famously known that the British Museum has looted or has taken, let's say, lots of important objects for various cultures from all around the globe and preserves them and protects them in their museums and their galleries. Such is the case of the Moais. And these two objects, which are in fact called, they have different names. One is Huahakananaya and the other is Moai which both mean something like hidden or lost friend or rejected or lost friend. That's the name given to the statues. Were both taken from the Rapa Nui island back in 1868 and were donated to the museum in 1869 because they were taken by this ship, which the crew decided that they will offer them to the Queen Victoria, and Queen Victoria said, okay, let's donate them to the museum, so they stand in the museum. However, there's this conflict that arose a few years ago when in July 2018, a representative of the Rapa Nui island and the Rapa Nui people requested for the return of these objects, which obviously mean very much to them and are part of their culture. However, they are legally or somewhat legally in the possession of the British Empire and the British Museum. So what can we say about this conflict? First, let's talk about the effect that looting and the alienation of such artistic heritage assets have on the identity of a place. And one can say many things, right? The looting and alienation of said artistic assets obviously has profound negative effects on the cultural identity of a place. Obviously, if a piece of your history is robbed or it's looted, it's taken, then you lose something with that, obviously. So we have that these cultural treasures, when removed or destroyed, basically take away a part of the culture's identity. And even furthermore, if it's not preserved, there is a loss of the historical narrative. For example, people don't know what their history is. There is a weakening of the cultural identity as they are no longer attached to this tangible object that represents them. And there is damage to social cohesion. Obviously, these objects, which are important for a culture, unify the people and bring them together. So taking away those objects obviously takes away from that social force and social union from people. So let's talk what to do. Is this the best option to return them, or what should be done? Obviously, the first step will be to return them. However, there are many issues and factors when it comes to returning these objects. It's not as easy as one might think. For example, there are legal and ethical questions of whether the museum acquired them legally, or maybe it's a private collector, or whether they are to be studied, or there are, for example, also issues with the preservation and their conservation. If they were taken from a place that nowadays doesn't have the infrastructure or the ability to preserve that said important piece of cultural value, then maybe it is better off in a museum where it is protected, where it will be conserved, and where it will be appreciated by a lot of people. However, this is clearly a topic of hot debate, and those are just things that should be considered, aside from the return of the object, which should be firsthand, but it's not as easy. As I said, it's not just like, here, take it, it's yours. Yeah, it is technically belongs to them, but it's not as easy as that. One must also see for the preservation and conservation of the subject. And that's basically what protection agencies should do, what heritage protection agencies have as a main role. They are agents in this protection and conservation. That's their primary role, but they also are in charge of the documentation, of informating other people, of education, of maybe promotion of these objects and these cultures in museums, in different exhibitions, and also somewhat handle these objects when they go from one place to another or when they need to be restored, for example. I also want to mention the topic of cultural appropriation because I think it's somewhat pertinent, though I don't think actually taking or looting this sort of objects like the moais is cultural appropriation, because though the object is being taken away from one place to another, it is not being taken and sort of like implemented into this other country. It is merely observed. It is merely taken, such as similar to a zoo. It is just put in display. It isn't integrated into a new culture. So that's kind of something to mention. I don't think it's cultural appropriation, but I do think it's wrong. And I do think there are better solutions. Like, for example, maybe a replica could be put of these moais and they could be returned to the people. If they do have the infrastructure to preserve it and conserve it, that will be adequate. Because I think, and it is in my opinion, that this kind of looting and taking of things, though it may seem innocuous because you're taking these things and you're maybe studying them, it is not done respectfully, obviously. And it wasn't done respectfully 100 years ago or 200 years ago. So the taking of these moais, of these objects, wasn't done with consent, wasn't done with purpose of studying them. It was just done in order to take them away. And nowadays that has to change. We have to do something to mutually respect other cultures and try and preserve them, or not only just take from them and have them in exhibition. It isn't a competition of how much stuff we have from other cultures, but rather an appreciation of other people, and that can be done without taking those objects away.